Welcome to Grade 1 View, the podcast for future CRNAs by future CRNAs, a partnership between AANA and Beyond the Mask.
Whether you're about to graduate from a nurse anesthesia program, trying to get accepted to nursing school, or you're somewhere in between,
this podcast is a resource and safe space for all things nurse anesthesia.
We're your Season 2 host team. I'm Levi Davis.
I'm Kelsey Muir.
I'm Mackenzie Lane.
And I'm Nicholas Alexander. So grab your Mac or your Miller, turn up your flows, and get ready, because this is Grade 1 View.
Hey everyone, this is Levi, one of your Season 2 hosts, and I'm here today with our host team, Mackenzie, Nicholas, and Kelsey. This is our first content episode together, and happy CRNA week. We wanted to start off this Season 2 where we actually all start, and that's before acceptance and the application process. When you're applying to CRNA school, everything seems to become about stats, GPA, your ICU type, your years of experience. And I know that I was deep diving on Reddit, comparing myself to strangers, wondering if I even belong. In this episode, we are going to discuss pieces of our journey, talk about applications and interviews, and the dreaded reality of waitlists, rejection, and having the stamina to learn and reapply. Because what matters most is all of our paths to get here look different, but we're all aiming for the same goal. If you're listening and you're applying, reapplying, you've been rejected, you've been waitlisted, told not this cycle, well, this episode's for you. So before we get into rejection and reapplying, I know this episode, the first episode, we briefly went over our intros, but I just want to give a quick background that's more relevant to CRNA school. Not looking for a full resume here, just mainly healthcare experience, nursing experience, ICU experience. Nicholas, if you want to head us off.
Perfect. So for me, my journey to healthcare actually started. I became an exercise physiologist, and I did that for a few years. And it was funny because, like Kelsey, I said I never wanted to be a nurse, but then I just wanted to get more involved. So I was a second degree nurse, and so I went to nursing school. I started in the neuro ICU, and I was there for a couple years. And then I was a travel nurse for a couple years, just around Colorado and California. And then when I decided to go to CRNA school, I went back to my old hospital and started working there again to try and just work on my resume, things like that. Because as some people know, it's like a full-time job trying to get into CRNA school.
Mackenzie?
Yeah. So I graduated from nursing school in 2022 and went straight into labor and delivery, thinking that midwife was the way to go for me long term. Realized very, very quickly that it was not. But like I had mentioned earlier, the head of the bed is where I realized I wanted to be, or doing epidurals, that sort of thing. So I started shadowing while I was still working as a labor and delivery nurse. And, I got the stern talking to from my mentor of, you've got to get into an ICU and you've got to go now, sooner rather than later. So I talked to my labor and delivery manager. Super hard, probably one of the hardest conversations ever, because who wants to let people down? Certainly not me. But transitioned into a ICU at a level 1 trauma center, worked there for a couple years. Applying was definitely like having a second job. I remember putting down for low census just so that I could study for the GRE and fill out applications and write my essays. Got a couple interviews, and here I am now.
Kelsey?
Yeah, so like Nicholas, I kind of talked about this last episode. Nursing is also a second degree for me. It took me a little while to get here. So I did an accelerated program, and I actually kind of officially really became a nurse when COVID hit. So that was an interesting time. I started in a step-down unit and quickly moved to the ICU at a level 1 trauma center, and then just did more like local contracts in the area. As I also mentioned in the previous episode, my dad's a CRNA, and I actually have some good friends who are also CRNAs. So I knew critical care was what I enjoyed. Whether I was going to go the NP or CRNA route was kind of up in the air, and then finally decided CRNA school was what I wanted to do. I am from the Philadelphia area, where there is a plethora of schools. We have anywhere, I want to say like 14 to 16 with new programs popping up or getting accredited. So it's daunting when you see that many schools, trying to figure out where's the best place to apply, where you think you might have your best shot. So I basically kind of started to look at what applications were open at the same time, because as both Nicholas and Mackenzie have said, applying is really a full-time job. And it also takes a village because you're asking people to write letters of recommendations for you. And that is time, from them. So it's if you can have them just kind of submit all kind of at once to all these different places, it does make life a lot easier for those folks as well. So yeah, I went through one kind of full cycle. I obviously was lucky enough to get in to a school, which we'll talk about, I guess, a little bit more in terms of our journey as well, in terms of getting rejected and waitlisted and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that was for me.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I think it's crazy. Pennsylvania, I think, is actually the top state when I was looking at it. It's the top state with the most schools.
Yeah.
And then it's followed by Ohio and Florida. Florida has 9 schools. It's pretty crazy. And it's so hard to get into these schools, even in the states that have a lot. And I feel
Yeah.
like there's more applicants in those states. It's crazy.
Yes. I think because people, I mean, I'll just say like maybe the tri-state area, yeah, we're pretty heavily populated with hospitals, people, obviously.
Nice.
And yeah, so lots of schools to choose from in a good way, but also lots of competition.
Yeah. As for me, I started my career off with EMT and paramedic. I did that for about a year and a half. I did not like going into people's houses and I did not like being around gang shootings. So I found my way to nursing school and transitioned over to the ER. I was in the ER for a few years and then I transitioned to critical care. I worked in a bunch of the critical care units, surgical. I worked in medical ICU, and then I was a part of the rapid response team. And I did that for about 10 years. Got my CCRN, and then COVID happened. And then I worked through that as a rapid response nurse, and that was terrifying. There was CRNAs that came to the floor because the OR shut down, and I thought they were heroes. I never thought about anesthesia school until then, and then that's kind of what brought my trajectory here to applying to CRNA school. So, all of these differences between all of our stories really shape what you are as an applicant going into it and what that process looks like for you. So, thinking back to our application processes, what did that journey actually look like? Not just the outcome and you landing CRNA school, but the process. How many cycles did you apply through? Rejections? Were you waitlisted? And did you end up going to a school you expected to? Kelsey, we'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I had said, Philadelphia heavily populated with schools. So, I really just went with the approach of what applications are open at the same time. And then I was fortunate enough to have a good enough GPA that a lot of schools, I think, were starting to err on the side of if you have X GPA that you don't actually need to take the GREs. I'm not sure what that is like for some of the other states. At least that was kind of the way in Pennsylvania here. Whether things have changed, I can't say.
Dreaded GRE, man.
I know. Yeah. So I was actually fortunate enough not to have to take that. But obviously, yeah, still the letters of recommendation, the CCRN, although it wasn't at the time, I feel like a mandatory thing, it was kind of one of those unspoken things. But I think a lot of schools are kind of transitioning to having that be a prerequisite. Obviously, the ICU experience, all that kind of stuff. So when I applied, like I said, I applied to 3 schools all at once, and I ended up getting waitlisted at the very first. I got accepted and then I got rejected. So I experienced it all. I will say the interview process was a little bit different at the places that I did actually end up interviewing. I interviewed at 2 out of those 3. One was actually a group interview, an online group interview.
A group interview. I have not heard of that one.
Yeah. I don't know if that's still a thing. I have heard from that some other schools do group interviews just to kind of see, your personality with also just handling that type of situation, how you deal with peers in that moment. And then it was, the other school that I applied to was an individual interview. So overwhelming, daunting. I will say though, my dad actually told me this. He's like, Kelsey, all it takes is one accept, to
Right.
accept you, which is really true. And I think that's something that people that are applying right now really need to keep in mind. It's like, I know you had talked about like your dream school. I don't think I had a dream school. I think the dream was just to get into school,
Right.
So I think it's people really, you have to, when you look at, I think if you Google actually even the number of applicants per school, it's anywhere from, I want to say 200 to maybe even 400 students, maybe per cycle. That's a lot. So you have to think with these smaller cohorts, if you are even just getting waitlisted or even just getting the chance to interview and you then get rejected, that's huge. Huge,
Yeah,
huge,
that's a
huge.
huge
So
step. You've cut out at least 40% of the other applicants if you've gotten
exact
that far.
exactly. So you really just have to give yourself credit if that first time round you have an interview and you get rejected, please do not let that deter you because that is a really big accomplishment, I think, in itself.
Right. Nicholas, you want to tell us about yours?
Yeah. First, one thing I want to say is I actually heard someone say this a couple months ago, and it was the best school is the one you get into. So you could be trying to go to whatever schools, and like you said, you might not get into your dream school, but whatever school you get into, that's like your chance. You make the most of it, and you do everything you can to graduate and become a CRNA. But for me personally, I actually don't even know if a lot of people know this, but I originally applied to NP school because I didn't think I would be able to be a CRNA or I'd be good at it. And truthfully, I think I was scared of the rejection. And it was actually in the first semester of NP school, I was sitting next to my charge nurse starting my homework. And I was like, I just don't love this. And she said, then don't do it. And it was like in that moment, I literally that night dropped out of school and just started applying to CRNA schools.
There you
Um,
go.
yeah.
Wow.
And
That's really cool.
yeah, for me, I actually applied to 6 schools, each kind of for their various reasons, and I was doing everything I could to stand out, trying to get good letters of rec, shadowing as many CRNAs as possible, precepting, trying to charge. For me personally, I got rejected from 1, I got waitlisted at 2, and then I was fortunate enough to get accepted at the other ones. I'd say one of the schools I actually didn't go to was supposed to be my dream school, but the school I'm at now, I'd say, is currently my dream school because every day I'm here, I'm just so thankful to be where I'm at and the relationships I've built here at the school. And there's just some really amazing providers here in Arizona that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to meet or work with if I didn't come here.
Yeah, I like that. Well, what about you, Mackenzie?
Yeah, kind of like Nicholas, I look back to like a very critical moment whenever I was still in labor and delivery, and I had been kind of talking about CRNA school, but kind of still that mindset of no, maybe I should go the MP route, or I'm not cut out for that, or just a series of different reasons why not to go. And the CRNA that had been sort of mentoring me, we were in the med room. I was grabbing epidural supplies. He was like getting his kit together and all that good stuff. And he was like, Mac, he was like, why do you want to be a CRNA? And whenever he asked the question, like I realized my answer is yes, like I do want to be one. And then since then, like my answer to that question has evolved and has really kind of come together. As far as the application journey, though, I got a year in first in the ICU before I started applying just to get my feet wet to make sure that I was learning some of that critical care experience that is really so necessary and important. By the time I actually applied, I had 40 plus hours of shadowing experience, which I don't know what you
Oh,
guys's were,
wow.
but
Yeah.
I was told the more the better. So I really buckled down and got those hours in, and it paid off because whenever I interviewed, I felt like the professors knew that I knew what I was getting myself into at that point. So that was good. I also had some humanitarian service slash volunteer service. I had taken the GRE, took the CCRN, and a big reason for the GRE for me was, to be honest, my nursing school GPA was a 3.5, so it was not great, not terrible, but I knew that that would be something that I would need to prove, like, hey, I can excel still, even though my GPA from nursing school wasn't perfect. So, and then whenever I found out that I got an interview offer, and even before then, I mean, guys, I was looking at study guides. I was doing mock interviews. I was having calls with my mentors of, hey, will you quiz me over something? Or what was your experience like? And I think one of the biggest takeaways that I learned from that was to put yourself out there and ask questions along the journey, because getting help is really, really important in this and reaching out and asking. And I got so much great feedback that I felt more prepared going into interviews. I personally applied to 5 schools. I got rejected from one, but a really cool thing they did was they did a follow up interview for those that got rejected, and they
Oh,
told you what you
nice.
could work on. So that was really important to me and
That's awesome.
helpful to me. And I really respected the faculty there for doing that. One school I got waitlisted for an interview and never got the interview. One school I got an interview and accepted, and that's where I'm at now. Never heard from another one. Didn't even get rejected, just never heard a thing. And then the last one, I got an interview, but I had already accepted my position at where I'm at now. So it really all worked out super, super well. But it's definitely one of those things where in the moment you've got to look back to that time where you decided this is what you wanted to do, and you've got to say, no, I'm sticking to that. This is what I'm doing. I'm going to keep moving forward. Even if I keep getting rejected, I'm going to keep going. And it's so
Right.
worth it in the end.
That's super important. For me, I applied through 2 cycles. I didn't hear back, didn't hear back, didn't hear back. Like I said, I was deep diving into Reddit, looking at all of the statistics that people were getting, seeing that people were getting into the school that I did have a dream school. It was the school that everybody at my hospital, everybody that I knew went to, and it just seemed like that was the case and that I would get in. And I did not even think about being rejected. Like having 10 years experience, my stats were not terrible, but my GRE was like it was right on the border. And I've discussed this with you guys. I do have dyslexia. Like I was in intensive reading until the 11th grade. I have a 5-year-old daughter that I try to read Dr. Seuss books to, and my wife and her just laugh at me every night because we're reading Fox on Socks, which is like the worst book to give somebody that switches words and adds words around.
Brutal, getting bullied by your own kid.
The GRE was just horrid for me. Like it was, and every time I took it, I got a worse score, and I was barely above the benchmark when it came to that first one. So I was even clept out, or like not even couldn't even apply to a lot of schools in Florida because of my GRE scores. And thankfully, the school that I did get into, they actually took the GRE off, and CCRN is now required, and they don't require the GRE. I'm sitting there reading about like turtles and alligators and algae, and I'm like, this is not connecting for me. And they're wanting me to infer what the author's saying. I'm like, I'm never going to get into school. So yeah, I was plain rejected after thinking like I was a shoo-in, and it was pretty humbling for that. I reapplied to that school, and then I applied to the school that I'm at and sent in a few other applications. And I heard back from the school that I got into, got an interview, and was even waitlisted for them. I didn't find out until about a month before my cohort started that I was it was actually like the day before Thanksgiving, and we started in January. I definitely was rejected. I was waitlisted, and those moments they don't feel good.
No.
Levi, can you actually, that's crazy because that's not the first story that I actually have heard of people getting in like very close to when they're supposed to start.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what I would probably myself take issue with is that's a really quick turnaround time in terms of like getting into the mental headspace that you need to be in order to start school. So I guess for the listeners, maybe can you talk a little bit about like what that was like, getting accepted and then, going further and then getting into school?
I was emailing the like admissions department, and I had gotten the contact. I even like talked to the financial aid people at the college. I was like, I don't know if these people talk, but I'm going to talk to all of them. I'm going to have a financial plan ready. Like they're going to know that I'm ready. So me and my wife just sat there and waited. We waited for the email. And then one day she was taking a shower, and I just burst in. I was like, oh my gosh, I got in. And she's like, oh my gosh, that's like in a month. And I'm like, yeah, my orientation's next week, and we got to find somebody to have the kids because you have plans. And it was just like, ever since then, it's been like pretty rapid, and it felt like it hasn't slowed down since. But the first year of my program was all online. So all of our didactic and everything, we have like, it's an integrated program, but front loaded with a bunch of like the core nursing classes and the doctorate classes. So at the time, my school did not have Florida clinical sites. So we were thinking, oh gosh, in a year, we're going to have to start moving to another state where they do have clinical. So it was exciting, but like you get this wave of excitement and just happiness. And then you have this moment of, oh my, like this is about to get real. So it was definitely quick, but I was thankful. Like I said, I thought I was a shoo-in for my dream school, and I didn't even get an interview, and the school took me right up, and it was nice. And I felt great. And I was going to do, like you guys have said, I was going to do anything to go to school. If it meant that I had to start the next day, I would have. So somewhere in that process, we all experienced some sort of rejection. It seems like even the fear of rejection. Was there a moment where the rejection really like hit you? It really hit you hard and had you down. And then what helped you keep going through that?
So I will say the very first school that I got, notified by, I ended up finding out I was waitlisted and it was the day before Christmas, which was pretty rough, I'm not going to lie. But I think it was like, okay, this is not a flat out rejection, although it kind of felt like that, if you will. I mean, cuz it's not the yes, you're in, but it's also your fate is just kind of like teetering. So you just don't feel like you can breathe that like sigh of relief. And that was hard, but I think it's continuing to tell yourself like, no, I know I have a really great background. I have the necessary experience. I know I have done everything to prepare for this moment. And so I don't feel like there's anything more I could have done to make that application any better than it was. So just kind of being at peace with that. And I think just trying, obviously the highs and lows of life, I totally understand that. And it's okay to kind of, I think, be upset, kind of lick your wounds though, and kind of move on. And so actually 2 weeks after I was waitlisted from that school, I ended up having my next interview. And I don't know what it was. It's like I felt like driving to it. I just kind of kept trying to tell myself like I am meant to be here. I know that I'm ready. I have done all the preparation. And so just taking like really big deep breaths prior to going into that interview. And I don't know, that's like weirdly one of the calmest interviews or like conversations when I did had that interview that I've ever had. So for any job or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. I guess my advice to hopefully soon to be nurse residents or RNs is just to, like push through kind of the pain, if you will, of rejection. And I swear you will see it on the other side, that acceptance. And all it takes is one, like I said.
Yeah, for me, I remember when I got rejected, I was in the elevator at work and I just my stomach sank and I was like, "I'm gonna be stuck here forever." I was like, "I'm never getting out of this hospital," because it kind of makes you question your abilities, and because I felt like I was just giving everything I had, and I was like, "Why didn't I get accepted?" But for me, it really made me buckle down, kinda sit down with myself to see what I could do better or ways I could improve myself. Fortunately, I was able to talk to the director from that school, and she kinda helped me out, come up like, just figure out things I could work on, and ultimately, all those things played a big part into the acceptances I got, but it was, like, in that moment, just, like, really just giving myself a moment to kinda sit with it and then just get back up and get going again, and, it really made me think because rejection doesn't necessarily mean that you're not qualified. I think throughout the interview process, there are so many little factors and, like, minute details, and it can get so easy to just become caught up in the rejection, but
Right.
if going to CRNA school is what you really want, you have to show, like, how resilient you are.
Right. And like any rejection, what I've been told before and what I had to tell myself eventually was the process of rejection. That's just the process of getting data for yourself and improving yourself. It's not an end all be all. It's just not right now. And you're
Yeah.
just creating a more practical data set to go with forward with and keep applying.
Mhm.
Mackenzie.
Yeah, absolutely to all of that. The one director at the program that I was rejected from in my follow-up interview with her, she goes, "You just need more experience." She's like, "From an emotional intelligence level," she's like, "We feel like you are ready." She's like, "But from a clinical standpoint, we would just like to see you with more experience." And just her taking the time to tell me that and me being like, "Okay, this is where I need to improve." And then also to receive that constructive criticism in a humble way, I feel like that really set me up for success in the long run.
That's helpful.
It's yeah, it was very, very helpful. I remember that specifically so I had interviewed at the school I'm at now, and you're kind of in that limbo period of like, it's all you think about, but you shouldn't just spend all your time thinking about that because you can't control what will happen. And my lease on my apartment was ending that we or in the coming weeks or whatever. And so just those weeks I was stressed. I was like, okay, if I get in, I don't need to re-sign a lease. So I'll just sublease a room from a friend and lived there for a while. I was like, I feel like my life is in shambles. I don't know where I'm going to live, don't know what I'm doing. So the day I moved out of my apartment, I was just really stressed and was like, I still haven't heard back from this school. I'm on like the all nurses feed, the Reddit feeds of like, has anyone heard back? Has anyone got a call? And I was just kind of freaking out. And I was like, I've got to go on a walk. I've got to clear my mind. I need to get outside, just get all that good, the endorphins flowing. And while I was on this walk, lo and behold, the director calls me and she was like, do you want to go to our school? And that was such a cool moment. But it definitely took me being cognizant of saying, hey, like the outcome doesn't define if you're going to be a CRNA one day or not, of this cycle specifically. Like if you're meant to do this, you will do this. So
Gotcha. So, for the sake of time and for the sake of program integrity with their interviews, I did want to go around and see questions about the interview. Was your interview more of emotional intelligence? Did you have content related questions? Not to go into too much detail, like I said, just to protect programs' integrity and their interview process. Just what did the interview look like? And if you were applying out of state, was that different for you? I know for me, I applied out of state in the interview that I had. It was a Zoom call and it popped up and there was 6 people that I had never met before. It was the program director, a couple of the associates, an anesthesiologist, and then the CEO of the company that's sponsoring this school. And mine was more emotional. I had studied so much of the CCRN. I had my the ICU book right there, ready to answer questions. I went through all this content, and I didn't get asked one single content related question. It was mainly emotional intelligence, and I really feel that the interview was geared toward, is this applicant going to make it to the end? What about you guys?
I definitely think that what Levi said about they look at you as, will this person be successful in our program? Obviously, but like you as the applicant have to go into that knowing that's what they're thinking.
Right. It's a
So you're
business and people look at
it
their attrition
is.
rates online, and that's a huge deal. It's reported. And so at the end of the day, it is a business and they have to know that you're going to make it.
Absolutely. So, and you're going in there showcasing yourself, but then you don't want to come off as a cocky know it all. So, there's a balance with
Right.
that.
Touche.
I was greeted with a surprise essay and pop quiz, which was super fun. And
Wow.
one of my
I've heard
interviews.
some I've heard some of them have simulations. Like you go into a room and there's a simulation that you go to, I've heard. And I'm
That
like, "Oh
Wow.
doesn't
my."
surprise me. That
Yeah,
Yeah.
me
doesn't
either.
surprise me. I'm sure the intention of that was partially to rattle you, was also maybe
Yes.
partially to say it was down to 2 applicants and maybe the one that did better on the pop quiz, whatever, gets in,
Okay.
that sort of thing. But then it transitioned into a regular interview, and it was everything from EQ to clinical scenarios. But I think that one of the things that stood out the most is a mentor telling me, like, hey, at the end of the day, you lead your interview. That conversation can be dictated by you if you're smart about it and if you're smart about the way you answer the questions. So it got to the point the conversation where it naturally came up things that I was passionate about in anesthesia. And I think that whenever the interview took that turn, one, like all my guards were down because I was able to genuinely speak on things that really mattered to me relating to anesthesia. And they saw that and they knew that. And we were able to connect over a lot of those topics.
Mackenzie, I definitely also had for one of my interviews was like a pop quiz and essay as well, which I was definitely not expecting. And that was before I actually went into the room to interview. So I feel like I was like, whoo, wasn't expecting this. All right, shake it off. Just do the best you can. And then I got a lot of also clinical scenarios, some, emotional intelligent questions, but then also just kind of like straight, what do you know about critical care? And I feel as if the questions kind of got harder and harder as the interview kind of went on. And I think they made it that way purposefully so that I would eventually get to a point or kind of tap out, if you will, and be like, you know what, I don't know this question. And I think they do that specifically to see if you're going to get rattled, if you're going to be like, I can't think, and try and, work your way through it. But I think what I had already said is I know that there's probably going to get to a point where I'm not going to be able to answer something. So let me just say I don't know the exact answer to that question, but this is based off all the knowledge that I have. This is my best educated guess. And then actually I also, after there was one question again, I think one or two that I, blanked on or did the best I could to answer. But I decided that day later on not only to email the program director and associate director and just thank them for allowing me to interview, but then also just saying, hey, I also took the time and I followed up on these questions and really just did a little bit of a deep dive for my own knowledge. And, thank you again. So I think sometimes taking that extra effort also just, again, it's always good to, I think, follow up with an email. Thank you for the interview process. But if there is a question that maybe you didn't have the answer to right away, I think it's great because it shows that you took the initiative to want to learn. And I think
Mhm.
taking initiative is really, really big in anesthesia school.
That's
So
a big, yeah, that's a big tip for when you're in the OR and they ask you a question. As long as you have an answer of like, I'm going to look it up, I'm going to use my resources, I'm going to ask my senior, like you usually can get away with that.
yeah.
Nicholas, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, was fortunate enough to not be surprised with an essay, thankfully. But I don't know. So I had 5 interviews. 2 were on Zoom. One of those was a group interview. 2 were in person in like a boardroom where you're just surrounded by CRNAs, just like rapid firing questions, which is horrifying. Yeah, I don't know. I think one of the interviews was just strictly emotional intelligence questions too. One was strictly clinical questions, specifically like cardiac. The school I'm at now, the interview kind of focused more on like my background. It was still fairly clinical based, but it was based on my specialty, which I thought was interesting. But it kind of just like led me just to the theory that like you can never be like too prepared. And I always try
Right.
to tell people to, I mean, study early. I've helped a couple people with mock interviews, and I just find it interesting that if you know you're going to go to CRNA school and you know you're going to have to know something for school or even as a CRNA, what's stopping you from learning that material now? I think that also
Mhm.
like shows initiative. Like if you come prepared to these interviews and you're obviously not going to know everything. The point is to kind of push you till you don't know things, but just take the initiative and study as much as you can because you're going to have to know this material eventually, and it just will prevent from some awkward interviews.
Yeah, that's so true. So I think we answered a lot of questions about interviews and stuff. And again, for those that are listening, any of these interview processes for any of these schools could change. So this is not the end all be all, and they could hit you with something completely out of the blue. So I want to pivot the conversation to those that have been rejected and they are reapplying. So if there is a listener right now that just got their rejection letter and they do plan to reapply, what should they focus on? Where should they be changing their application actively?
Definitely take some grad school classes,
Yes.
if your school doesn't require the
Absolutely.
GRE, like, take some grad school classes, or even if it
Yes.
does require the GRE,
Like
take some.
those baseline core graduate
Yeah, the
like
big P's.
A&P, yeah,
The
A&P
big
Mhm.
and
P's.
pharmacology, health assessment. Those are ones that you could eventually put towards nurse practitioner, or I think every graduate nurse has to take
Correct.
those classes. But if you can get A's in those classes and show that you paid for a non-degree seeking student to at the doctorate level to get in, like that is huge. That shows so much initiative to a program, more than anything that you could come to the table with, I believe.
Yeah,
Bingo,
Yeah.
bingo.
and I know some schools just go absolutely nuts for biochemistry. So it's
Oh,
like, yeah, take biochemistry. I mean, I had to take it in school. It was not fun, but a lot of schools definitely favor that. I'd also have to say, we kind of touched on it earlier, just being a well-rounded person. Schools just don't want people that focus just on their work or anesthesia. Like volunteer, like it doesn't have to be healthcare related. I know someone that volunteered with the Special Olympics, and that was so cool, and it just made their resume look so much better. I know other people that like run ultra marathons. And I think if you're able
oh
to
wow.
talk about that in the interview and how you're able to push yourself mentally, that's another cool thing that can help you stand out as well.
Yep, and being authentically
Yeah.
you is
Yeah,
huge in the interviews. Like,
absolutely.
Mhm.
don't be this scripted robot when you go into an interview
Right.
that you've
Mhm.
listened to all these videos and watched all of these things and read on Reddit exactly what to say. Like, don't be a robot. Be you, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's okay to be. They're expecting you to be nervous in these interviews. They don't. You're not perfection.
Yeah. I
No one
think
is.
so a mentor of mine said, treat your application like a story, not a checklist, because I think admission committees can really just spot, resumes or spot the applications where it's like they're just trying to, meet all the requirements rather than telling more of like an authentic narrative.
Yeah.
I was going to say, in terms of people that are reapplying, I think everything that Nicholas Mackenzie has kind of talked about is really important. But what I didn't realize, actually, the first application, but I did kind of for my second application, was that you should actually utilize your undergraduate school for, in terms of their like career center. So you should go back, have them reread, proofread your essays maybe, or have them review your resume. I feel like that's a really untapped resource that people don't even realize that they could use. I think that's important. And I definitely agree with what Mackenzie was saying. I think like the big P's, physical assessment, pharmacology, and pathophysiology, if you can take those classes and do well, I think that will really, really improve
It
your
shines.
chances of, getting
Yeah.
an interview at least.
Yeah, speaking of like transcripts, one of my problems was actually I had a lot of withdrawals on my transcripts. So being able to print out your transcript, I had it sitting right in front of me, and I was able to go class by class all the way back to my first semester of taking A&P right out of high school that I got an F in because I didn't care. I didn't know what I was doing. That was years before I was even thinking healthcare. I just took the class because I thought, and I got an F in it. I had to explain like that was like me 15 years ago. And then like all the W's, the withdrawals on my transcript, those were due to military obligation. I dropped those classes because I had left for the Army, but it looks like I had quit if that wasn't explained. So being able to explain your transcript if you have any discrepancies is huge, because my interview, I did have to go class by class, semester by semester, and explain that first F and then those withdrawals. And because it was due to military service, it was like a relief. Like it was almost like they just wiped that off.
In my one interview, I had to kind of learn to read between the lines because the person interviewing me, she said, "Tell me about your undergrad experience." And I was like, "Why does she want to know about my undergrad experience specifically?" Then I was like, "Oh yeah, I made a C in chemistry my freshman year. That's what she's asking about." So just jumping in and owning that, and then being like, "Hey, 6 months ago though, I retook a chemistry course and I made an A in it." And she was like, "Okay, cool. Like, thank you for owning that. Thank you for your honesty." And then if you feel like your interview is going south or like you're butchering it, two like things that I kind of did to kind of save the day if I could, was to know things about the school and then know things about the person that's interviewing you. So that you
Yes.
can always kind of swoop in, ask some good questions about the school. You show you did your research. You show that you want to go there and that that's why you applied there. And then the person interviewing you, I asked one of the faculty, I was like, "So tell me about like why are you passionate about cardiac anesthesia?" And she talked for like 5 to 10 minutes answering that question.
Wow.
And I could tell it really mattered to her that I had done that research and that I read her CV. So
Right.
stuff like that
Yeah.
can help a lot.
Don't ask questions that are on their website FAQ page. Like that will
So
just
true.
that will
Yeah,
get them
that
to
will
write
not
you
So
look
off
true.
good.
very
Yeah.
quickly.
Mackenzie said shadowing, she had 40 hours. Be able to speak to that. Like, try to shadow as many CRNAs with as many different cases. I know someone that had over 100 hours. I personally had 60. And I also was with the CRNA that allowed me to intubate. And so I was able to go
Oh,
into the
wow.
interview and actually talk about what it was like and what I specifically did and what I thought was interesting with that. And then as far as even when you're doing poorly in an interview, just like with questions, I think it is really cool to even do your research about the politics of nursing anesthesia. Like if you come
Mhm.
in knowing the boards of nursing anesthesia, the AANA, COA, things like that, it just makes you stand out. And even just generally having an understanding of how CRNAs got to the positions they're at now.
Yeah, and go to conferences, go to
Yes,
Yeah,
Yes,
conferences. You
that's
100%.
do not
huge.
have to be a SRNA or a CRNA to go to these.
Yep. The
Right.
AANA
RN
has RN memberships. Yep.
exactly,
Yep.
they
Even
have
your
RN
state
memberships,
conference
please
you can go
go.
to.
Yes, and
Yeah.
To shout out Florida's association, they actually have RN sessions to where they had all of the program directors on a panel and they talked about each school, and the RNs could come up and ask questions to those directors.
Such a great way, yeah, to meet people and to really get your name out there.
Networking is at least a
Yes,
third of the battle.
huge.
Maybe not half,
That
but a
Exactly.
third.
it was like
So
So that was more than I realized, is a lot of it is, like, kind of based off of who you know, and that plays a huge role in acceptances as well.
So, if the podcast, this episode was limited to this one question, what's the one thing you wish every CRNA applicant knew? What would be your answer, Kelsey?
Mine is definitely seek feedback early. I feel like, and from the right people, not waiting until you feel like your application is finished or ready to go. I think it's important to have CRNAs, current SRNAs, or maybe faculty advisors review kind of your personal statement, your resume, doing mock interviews. I try to help all of my fellow friends in terms of that are applying to CRNA school and helping them with mock interviews. So if you are an SRNA right now and you know people that are going, help them out. Okay. So it, like I said earlier, it takes a village to get these people in. You have done it, made the necessary work. So yeah, just seek feedback early.
Nicholas, last word of advice?
For me, it's resilience isn't pretending rejection doesn't hurt. It's taking that feedback without letting it define your worth, using it, whether good or bad, to grow and choosing not to give up. Because when you have that rejection, sometimes it's just the pause. Keep growing, keep improving, keep moving forward, because that resilience is what will set you apart, not only in school, but throughout your entire CRNA career.
Nice.
So good.
And Mackenzie?
So good. Find your why early on for sure. That's going to help you get through those grueling months or years of application, and find a niche of anesthesia that you're passionate about and do a deep dive into that while you're applying, whether it be rural anesthesia, obstetric anesthesia, the politics of anesthesia, the VA. Find something that clicks with you and do a deep dive on that.
That's a good
Nice.
one.
Yeah, I like that. Mine is every no leads you to your next yes. So
Oh,
keep
so good.
going, like take the hit, feel the pain of it, but keep applying, because the only people that become CRNAs are the ones that go to CRNA school. And you just got to keep applying and be the one. You got to make it. Find the fit for you. They'll fit you into their program, and you just every no leads you to your yes. So this was a great episode. I loved hearing you guys' stories.
Yes,
This was
great first episode.
Yes,
Season
yes.
2
So
host.
fun.
Woo!
That's
Yeah, so
right.
as we wrap up, I just want to remind listeners that, like Nicholas said, rejection hurts, but it does not get to decide your future. Pray about it, manifest it, wish upon a star, however you do you. This isn't the end. Keep moving forward. Timing is not a verdict, it's part of your process. If you fall 7 times, then you're going to stand up 8. Rejection is just more data for you to work with. And we're going to see you on the other side of this thing. Happy CRNA week. Thanks for listening.